Me all the time in the world.
All right. Well, hello everyone waiting on the live stream today, Sunday, 27th of December. Hope everyone had a wonderful, wonderful, and happy Christmas. We have the pleasure of having Mr. Jason Min, Pastor Jason Min, Sir
Uh,
Jason Min join this evening.
uh,
Say hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm still getting used to the pastor thing. I don't like it, but I guess that's what I do.
So when remind me, I don't know if in each of these live streams I've sort of been comparing my recollection of things with the other party's recollection of things, but tell me your recollection of how we crossed paths.
Man, I mean, other than the fact that you're a Philly legend, I'm pretty sure it was through Joe Chai,
Oh
our
yeah.
mutual friend. Um, he I think he was serving at Jubilee at the time, and the church that you were leading praise at. Um, and I think he would talk about you all the time. And I think at some point we crossed paths a few times, and then I think we had the like. I want to say you built me a couple pedals, and you know that's when we actually got to interact a little bit more personally, and then we had the opportunity to serve together for worship. I think we did like a young adult, kind of like a young adult united retreat in Philly, and that was maybe like a year before I moved back to LA. So um, yeah,
That's
I'm
right.
pretty sure that's yeah.
So far memories are coinciding 100% because that's how I remember it
Nice.
too. I remember when I first built a pedal, I forget what it was. I think it was called Nineveh.
Yes, it was the Nineveh. I think I might still have it. It was an orange. It was an orange pedal with blue knobs.
Yeah. That was please use that as a paperweight. Okay, because that was I was afraid to say it at that time, but that was an experimentation that I was doing.
I feel like
Um,
I liked the pedal though.
yeah, I think you did. I liked it too. And then I remember I was like, can we do a informal videotape of you just playing through it? And this was still when you were um, imparting your wisdom in Hagwon fashion.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
It was
that's
at
right.
that building.
Yes, in one of the classrooms, I think.
That's right. Brings back memories. Um, and that so, I think fast forward, um, you had moved and you had been involved in a couple of different music projects along the way, but uh, I think in 2010, 2011, you came out with that album, um, solo album with just you and guitar and sort of songwriting, singer songwriter type feel to it. And I remember I heard this one song, "The Man and His Wife," and I'm like, wow, this is really neat. And it's not only neat from the standpoint of being a really nice song and having um, a great feel to it, but the story behind it is pretty profound. So, could you just, for those of the viewers that may not be completely familiar with the song, could you just um, introduce us to the song and your thoughts behind it and how you came about creating it?
Yeah, I mean, this song is one of those where you don't even believe you had like I don't even believe I had the ability, and I'm not saying the song is like mind-blowingly good or anything, but at the time I don't even, it was one of those that came together super fast, like faster than any other song I'd written, and it kind of had legs of its own. And where at one point I was like, I didn't even feel like I possessed the ability to write a song like that. And so, in some ways, that song more than any other song probably has a special place in my heart. Um, but obviously, I think the biggest reason why it does is because of the story behind it. And um, you know, uh, at the time, my girlfriend, who is now my wife, she had a pair of who she referred to as her American grandparents, and they were Mr. and Mrs. Barkley, and they were just the sweetest couple who kind of took her Carol's mom in when she first came to the States at the age of 16 years old, and they were just so good to her, and so they almost, she kind of viewed them as like second parents to her. And so Carol grew up kind of referring to them as her grandparents in some ways. Um, and when we started dating, I had an opportunity to meet them because they were at a lot of they were at the graduations. They would always send birthday cards and Christmas cards, and the families just continued to stay in touch. And there was one specific day when Carol took me to visit the Barclays, and because we had heard that Mrs. Barkley had um, been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, not a little bit shortly before that. And so we went to visit them, and I had visited their home multiple times, and Mrs. Barkley was your classic grandmother, just so warm, like almost like a caricature, baking cookies, and bright, and someone just so nurturing. But this particular time, the house immediately felt different the moment we walked in. Um, and yeah, I mean, you could tell it was like the life had been sucked out of that home in some ways. And Mr. Barkley, who is just one of the finest men I think I will, ever have the pleasure of meeting. He kind of warned us that, she might not recognize, who we were. And he was, kind of sharing with us how difficult it's been. He's this um, strong believer. And so he was, talking about how just this whole season has kind of tested his faith in God. And it was one of the most heartbreaking aspects of that conversation was him kind of telling us, yeah, like a lot of times she doesn't even recognize who I am. And he kind of had kind of takes care of everything around the house now. Um and it was like this, I mean, I can't even imagine what that would be like, to have the love of your life, you know, s- one day just stop recognizing you. And being like an emo songwriter that I am, at that time, like everything was a song, potential song. I carried my journal around with me everywhere. And so he inspired me so much in that conversation that I went home and started writing because I wanted to write this song about this man's just like unconditional love for his wife. It was just, I was like, man, like I want a song to capture that kind of love, that kind of sacrificial love. And literally for weeks could not come up with anything, had massive writer's block. And it was one of those things where like I wanted to write a song about it so badly. It wasn't, it felt like it was too um, important of a song to drop. But I couldn't get anywhere with it. And then I think one day, like as I was kind of reflecting on my own, I realized that maybe the reason it was so difficult for me to write a song from Mr. Barkley's perspective was that I I don't think I really understood his perspective, because I realized that I hadn't loved anyone unconditionally before, and so to try to embody, like, have a song and have lyrics that I write embody what Mr. Barkley was feeling, I realized I couldn't do it. And then I kind of flipped the script and I said, I wonder what it would be like to write the song from Mrs. Barkley's perspective. This woman who kind of every day wakes up and sees this man loving on her in the most sacrificial ways. Who, I mean, like, she obviously knows that he's not a stranger, because there are these photos of them. I distinctly remember there's like a wedding picture of them, on the living room table. And so I know that, I was like, man, what would it be like to feel like I know I'm supposed to know who this guy is.
Hmm.
I don't recognize him fully, and yet um, he's just doing the most amazing things for me.
Hmm.
And literally, once I kind of like took it from that perspective, the song came together in, less than a day.
Hmm.
And and as I kind of reflected on why it was so much easier for me to write from her perspective, was in some ways I realized that it was very similar to, my relationship with God. My It is still obviously I would like to say it's the most important relationship in my life. But even as a pastor now, I can say that if I look back on my life, most of it, when I think about my relationship with God, is a lot of failure, is a lot of forgetting who God is, and um, and yet every morning I wake up, and even in the moments when I feel furthest from God, I you know I there is this sense in which He's always pursuing me. He's always there, and He's always with me. And it. I mean, I can't believe it's been almost 10 years since I wrote the song,
Yeah.
and that truth is truer today than it was even then. But yeah, and so the I guess the what I was hoping to convey with the song was like the heart of someone who was like, who realized they were constantly forgetting the person, who loved them the most. But then just this, it was this supposed to be this soul cry of like, but please don't give up on me. Please don't let me just, you know, leave. Like, please keep pursuing me, because I know that there's nothing in me that's gonna, you know, be able to hold this relationship up on my
Hmm.
shoulders. And
Hmm.
so,
Yeah, I
yeah,
could
that's kind of
definitely.
where the song is. Yeah.
That's amazing. I could definitely a lot of that sort of uh, echoes inside me as I hear you talking about it, especially when you're talking about failures and even, I mean, particularly the failure of wanting to turn to him,
Mm.
and sometimes the failure goes even far as wanting nothing to do with him, and trying your hardest to run the opposite way. And you know, maybe if you have a large volume of that Pinot one of these days, I can share the Pinot and I can tell you more about it. But you know, that idea of failing to that degree and even trying to run away, and him um, passionately refusing to let you go. I think I've come to understand some of that more recently,
Mm.
and that's sort of um, a large part of. I mean, why am I even embarking on making an album? Like, people look at me and I'm sure people look at me, they're like, why are you even doing this? you know? And and I don't know how you and your brother are in terms of your emotional palate, but I've talked about this previously, but the way my father was and he's someone I call emotionally constipated.
Hmm.
His emotional palette is very monochromatic.
Hmm.
Even that one color, he's unable to use that one color very well, and it's amazing how genetics get passed on to your children. Even if the children vow to never be like their parents in certain ways, it gets passed
Yeah.
on. And I got to tell you, my brothers and I, with me especially, my emotional palette is extremely monochromatic, and the little color I have on the palette, many times I refuse to use that color to express myself.
Hmm.
And I that's sort of where the idea for this album came about. The theme of the album is suffering and its many facets. And I've gone through a season of suffering and failure, and hence the theme. But the reason why um, the man and his wife sort of intersected with the the pursuit of putting this album together is, my father, uh, 4 or 5 years ago, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Hmm.
And a lot of what you're telling me with your beloved neighbors, um, I didn't understand at that time before his diagnosis. I listened to the song, and I think I listened to it twice at the time it came out. The first time because it sounded so nice. The second time because I felt like I had to listen to the words more closely because I knew that there was a story of Alzheimer's there. But I have to tell you, because I didn't step one foot in the shoe of an Alzheimer's patient, nor did I have anyone in my family stricken by it. It didn't connect to me. It didn't connect with me the way it does now.
Hmm.
And there are different songs on this album. There are songs about you know the mother's struggles as she tries to raise her children. There's struggles about um, longing to be with someone but not having the opportunity to be with them, and so on and so forth. But I felt like, especially now that his disease is progressing, I wanted to put something on there that speaks to that aspect of suffering. But there was this beautiful song made in 2011 that already, told that story. So I was like, okay, first of all, there's no way in the world that I can write something that's as nice as, what's written already in this song. So how do I go about doing this? And I thought about the presentation that my dad had when he first got diagnosed, and the presentation. His main symptom is he's lost the ability to express himself. So
Hmm.
when he gets excited about seeing family, he'll his volume will increase, and he'll say a lot with his mouth, but literally everything that comes out of his mouth is gibberish. It's like another
Hmm.
language. And the term given to that is aphasia, the inability to express oneself. And there's a subgroup of Alzheimer's patients where that symptom is predominant, and he's one of them. So
Hmm.
I thought about it, and I said, what if there was this hypothetical situation where he had the opportunity to listen to this song that speaks so wonderfully to the suffering behind Alzheimer's, and um, you know, and it would be a song that would remind my father that he is loved,
Hmm.
right? But um, I got frustrated with that idea because it, the capacity of language being lost in him. He would listen to the song and it would make no sense to him.
Hmm.
It would be like gibberish, right? So that's when I contacted you and said, um, how about if I take this song that makes so much sense to someone who has all their capacities intact, but um, manipulated such that it's almost like what my dad would hear in his mind if he
Hmm.
listened to it. And even though the words themselves sound like gibberish, and we'll play it in a second, and it sounds like gibberish, but there's a melody that's behind it that's sort of, and so, some of that original beauties I think preserved, but in a different form. Um, and I've marked the different sections of this remix here, um, but this outro that I don't think you've had the opportunity to listen to. This is something that I added on at the end. Up until that point, it's all gibberish, with little bits of words here and there that you can tell it's Jason's original vocals, and there are words that make sense here and there, and I think that's the way my dad's mind has been working. That once in a while he'll have moments of clarity, but most of it's nonsense in his mind. But one day towards the end, things will become more clear. And here in
Hmm.
this outro, you actually hear a little bit of the song as it was originally recorded fading in.
Hmm.
And that's my hope. That's the hope that I have to hold on to, and most of my dad has to hold on to, is that um, all of that illness will one day disappear, and the ability to understand will be restored. So,
Man,
um,
I love that so much. And yeah, I mean, I didn't even know. I knew part of what you just shared, but I mean, that's it. Just um, yeah, I have chills right now listening to you. So thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so let me get into the nerd moments, I guess, the
Hmm.
musical nerd moments. So, I took your song, and because I think the song was mainly vocals and guitar, it was
Hmm.
it was easy to put through a process where you can actually pull vocals out of a track. So here, I'll play this, which was what I extracted, and this is the original vocals.
I don't know who you are.
Oh, by the way, do you have this stream going on somewhere, Jason? Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to hear it.
No, I don't.
Okay.
How would I access that?
Here, let me do this. Let me share. Okay, I copied the link, and I'm gonna chat it to you in
Cool.
Zoom. Okay.
Sweet. Awesome.
Let me know when you got to pull it up.
Yep.
Okay. There we go.
I don't know who you are, but please don't leave me alone here, 'cause I'm coming undone. Oh, tell me.
So that was the vocals that I pulled out, and you can still hear a little bit of the guitar that got left behind, right? Um, but then what I did was, this is the second track in this album where I used a technique called granular synthesis, where it's basically you take a small grain or a couple of grains, and you put it along a wave file, a sound file, and you make it sort of quiver around in different locations. And although it sounds like noise in the beginning, if you make it quiver just in the right spots, it actually produces a fairly unique and nice sound. And this is where I took, what makes sense, which are the words that you sang, and made it sound like gibberish, but with a melody that's made by the gibberish. And this is not the actual programming of this, but this is that vocal track here. And what you can do is you can play different segments having the grain quiver back and forth, but you can change the location of the grain along the track, making some interesting sounds. So it's your vocal track, but it's quivering, and because you're holding out notes in the original lyric, if you have it quiver along a note that's being held, but across words on the same note, it actually produces a pretty unique effect. So that's what was in the intro of the song, and sort of runs as a motif throughout the whole song. Again, all of the vocal sounds in this track are you in that original song, but with the idea of someone like my father trying to listen to the song and can sort of get hints of melody, get hints of words coming through, but most of it not making sense until the
That's awesome.
until the very end.
That's so cool.
All right,
Yeah.
so let's listen to it. We don't need these tracks anymore, so let me delete this. All right, so here's the Man and His Wife Aphasia remix. And there you have it.
I love it. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah, and
I love the
even
ending, actually.
to you. Yeah, I love the ending as well. Um, that moment of clarity that I hope my dad can get to, in the end. And you know, out of all the words I had, sort of peek through with, um, in a sensible manner, I picked, "Tell Me You'll Stay."
Mm.
I think you could hear some of that in the beginning as it was building up, and um, there are times where you know I try to tell myself, in retrospect, after all of this is said and done, things will certainly make sense as to why, um, things passed and progressed the way they did. But is there a day where, um, if I was given the opportunity to choose between, learning God's faithfulness in retrospective fashion versus having my dad back in full capacity, I would choose the latter any day of the week, right? To be honest.
Yeah.
Um, so that I think that's where I decide to have that sort of "tell me you'll stay" word peek out at times, because there are moments where I'm frustrated, and I want my original father back the way he was.
Mm.
And there are also times in the song where it sounds angry, and that's both me trying to portray my frustration, but at the same time, his emotions have ups and downs, and you know I got even this past weekend when we visited him. It's always a tough time visiting and trying to spend time with family, and carrying ourselves on in the spirit and the joy of Christmas, but at the same time that there's this lingering, um, frustration and sadness that everyone has to sort of, the elephant in the room everyone has to deal with, which is, um, my dad doesn't understand what's going on, you
Mm.
know, and and sometimes he realizes he doesn't understand what's going on, and he gets angry. So
Mm.
there was that little section here where, I went back and forth about whether or not to leave that section in, because it sounds very different from the rest of the song, but that's sort of another moment of anger that I
Mm.
injected into the song. Anyway, I really appreciate you allowing, a very mellow and, um, um, nice singer songwriter type song being, um, lent to someone like me in a trusting fashion. Like, I'm sure there was some nervousness on your part. Like, what is he gonna do with this?
If there were anyone though, they say that songs are like children, and this is weird to say, but if I could give my children away to anyone, you would be on that short list, Edmund.
Oh
So
gosh. I'll pretend that's not being said just because you're on live stream and there are people watching, and but I appreciate that. That's
uh,
very nice of you to say. It's very nice of you to say. Paula says hi. In case you're not following the chat right now.
hello, Paula.
Yeah.
I there's a very, very, very short list of people that I miss, like doing music with, and Paula is one of them.
Hmm.
I miss I miss you and your whole family. Ah, yes. But
Well, Paula, if Pastor Jason puts his money where his mouth is, eventually he'll move back to Philly, right? I'm just kidding. No
uh,
pressure. No pressure. I'm sure you're doing great things out there on the West Coast. Yeah.
uh,
So this is going to come out on Spotify and iTunes and other
awesome.
platforms come January 21st, and I hope other people benefit from this as well as the other tracks that I've spent many hours, many hours, and it's a learning on the job type situation because
Yeah,
I don't have the background for this, but I'm learning as I go.
I was gonna say I think it's so great that you're doing this, and I actually I think I speak for both of us where um, I think people will be surprised who maybe not people who know you super well, but I think people who know you kind of like superficially maybe will be surprised by the music that is happening in your head that comes out. And that's always been the case with me. Like people who know me have like historically always been like, why, like they're like, you strike me as such a happy guy, Jason, but why are all your songs so sad and so mellow? And I remember listening to a podcast by one of my favorite songwriters, and he was talking about that dynamic as well. Like when the songs that you produce or write feel so out of character, and he was kind of saying that, like, growing up, um, he was always expected to be a certain type of person, and he really kind of um, he executed that blueprint perfectly.
Mm,
He was the guy that everyone wanted him to be, but he felt like music was the one place where he had the permission to kind of like express the parts of himself that maybe other people didn't get to see, or the parts of himself that were absolutely real but that were just kind of suppressed or dormant. And even when you talk about you being like seen as having like monochromatic emotions, it's you would never assume someone with that reputation making music like this. And so I just think it's really cool, and I think it um, reminds me of the power of music,
mm,
to like not only to connect with people but to unlock certain parts of ourselves,
mm,
that
mm.
don't always get to be unlocked.
Well said. So, do you have any music coming up? Coming up?
Sadly, no. But it's really interesting that you asked me that, because very like maybe like 2 days ago, Carol out of nowhere was just like, "Hey, you haven't like pulled out your guitar in so long. What can you just like like we had put the kids down. It was like an exhausting day,
Mm,
and she was just like, "Can you just why don't you just play something?" And it was really therapeutic. It was nice, but all that to say, I'm hoping to get back into the swing of it, um, you know,
that'd be
this year.
awesome. That would be
Yeah.
awesome. And I'm sure many other people agree with me. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Cool.
Any hopes for 2021 for you and your family?
Man, like if you had asked me that question at the beginning of 2020, I had so many hopes and dreams. I had grand visions. Like 2021, I would be very happy to eat at a restaurant inside again, or give a good friend a hug. I feel like my expectations have decreased significantly, but I guess that's okay.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think 2020 has been really good for me personally and my family, in that I think it's exposed as it has for a lot of people. I think it's exposed certain cracks. It's revealed the things that um, I realized that I hadn't really been giving maybe enough attention to, and so I'm hoping in 2021 I can now like we can now like intentionally start to address those things.
mm.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. All right, Jason. It was an
Thank
absolute
you.
pleasure um, doing this chat with you and getting to listen to the final product. Cheers! Happy New Year! Happy early New Year with my large cup of water and your glass of Pinot.
Happy New Year! Thank you, Edmund, for including me
Absolutely.
on this journey.
Thank you for being who you are. All right, buddy. So that went pretty well.